This book is called Lorne, the Man Who Invented Saturday Night Live. And I read all 600 pages of this book in one day. No, not in one day. I read it in a week. And we are lucky enough to have on the show the author of this book, Susan Morrison, is here. How are you, Susan?
I'm fine, thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show and being a part of the best show. And this book you wrote came out in February or thereabouts?
That's right. Yep, right around the time of the 50th anniversary of the show.
Yeah. Now this book, first of all, it's 600 pages. How long did it take you, all told, to write the book Lorne?
Well, I'd say I worked on the book for about a decade. And, the book was originally, you don't realize how lucky you are because the book was originally twice that long. And I had to chop it down. But
Are you
there's
kidding?
an awful lot.
That sounds like I feel like I've been robbed now of a 1,200 page Lorne Michaels book.
I'll tell you, Judd Apatow has offered me lots of money for what he calls the director's cut version of it.
Yeah. It's shocking that Judd Apatow would prefer the longer version of anything, but I guess to each their own. So 1,200 pages, so a decade, you cut it down to 600. Yeah. And what was can you just talk about the general idea of how this came together?
Yeah. Well, about 10 years ago, after the show had that fantastic 40th anniversary show on the air, I was so moved by it and impressed by it. It was really funny. And I started thinking about how remarkable it is that this one guy who was then 70 years old, Lorne Michaels, had been so influential in what has made Americans laugh, what we all think is funny, for decades. And, it goes beyond a kind of Monday morning water cooler chit chat. Like, I think that there's something about the language of that show has sort of rewired people's brains. People have those catchphrases in their wedding vows. And so I started thinking, Lorne Michaels, so influential and important, he's been hiding in plain sight. He's never really talked much to the press over the years. And I just thought it'd be fascinating to try to get at what makes him tick. Now, I knew him a little bit because when I was a kid, when I was 23 years old, I worked for him for a few months on something called The New Show, which was his one spectacular failure.
Yeah.
It was a time version of SNL. So we kind of vaguely knew each other. And, he likes The New Yorker where I work. And so I sold the book. I sold a book proposal without saying that he had agreed to do it. And then I went to see him and I said, Lorne, I've just sold a book about you. I don't need anything from you because I know your people and everything. But if you wanted to talk to me, it would be a richer and a better book. And after looking like he was going to have a heart attack, with a few days later, he got on board and we had a lot of fun. We talked to each other about 50 times and spent a lot of time over there. And it paid off.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the biggest thrills for you to talk to in the course of doing all the research and compiling for this book? Because there are just dozens of people who were involved in this.
I talked to everybody. And I mean, Lorne himself is a great talker, but lucky for the biographer, he also hires people who are smart and funny and articulate. I'd say some of the smartest people about Lorne and funniest, Conan O'Brien. I spent a whole afternoon with him. He was so smart about Lorne. John Mulaney, a real Lorneologist, has a lot to say about what makes him tick. Lorraine Newman, very penetrating about Lorne. Some people who aren't household names, Marilyn Suzanne Miller and Rosie Schuster, who was Lorne's first wife. They were both writers in the first 5 seasons and very astute. Chris Rock, brilliant guy, funny. It goes on and on. Tina Fey. Tina Fey worked so much with Lorne, and she's absorbed a lot of his management techniques,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. With something this comprehensive and covering decades of his life professionally and just his life. It's amazing. One of my takeaways was that after 600 pages of living with him, going through every part of his existence, it's, even though I come away knowing as much as I'm ever going to know about Lorne Michaels, there's still this unknowable quality to him where you're just not, he seems to often be what you project onto him for somebody outside of the circle. And for people, look, I know people who've worked with him, and they have, the opinions are as wide ranging as you could imagine, but because he's been adjacent to so many things while being the architect of the thing, that it's such an interesting thing, because he's a producer of the show. So he's a compiler of talent. He's been a writer at varying points. It seems like he's leaned into it more enthusiastically at different points in his life, where one of the most interesting things was this desire he had for much longer than I would have ever imagined to become a filmmaker. Was something that seemed like a legitimate goal of his that he held on to for much longer than you would think if you think of him as the guy who created Saturday Night Live.
No, right. You make a very good point that even after 600 some pages, there is a streak of unknowability about him. And that is part of his potency. It's part of his power. He has a remote management style. He always leaves people wanting a little bit more from him.
Mm-hmm.
Conan O'Brien said it's almost like he has this inner core of incredible vulnerability that he's wrapped with all these layers of insulation, but you can sort of sense something in there that's like all comedy people are kind of broken toys, as Mark put it. So he's some of that. But you're right. He is, like, as I researched it, I was sort of amazed at like what a kind of wild Forrest Gump kind of life he's had. He was always there. He flew into LA right after Bobby Kennedy was shot. He testified at Keith Richards' heroin trial. He did acid with Flip Wilson.
Which that could have been a book in and of itself, is Lorne Michaels doing acid with Flip Wilson.
I know. I want to see that on the stage. But no, I think that
that could be your Frost Nixon. Also, you could do Michaels Wilson.
No, and I think most people don't know, because I didn't, that he got banged up a lot along the way. He was rich and famous so early that it's hard for people to recognize that he hit some dead ends. He had some, the failure that I worked on, the new show, his aborted film career. Yes, we all know him as the producer of Wayne's World and Coneheads. But before that, he wanted to make art films. He always wanted to make a movie like The Graduate. And, there was a time he was working on a reboot of Jane Austen and, Don DeLillo's White Noise. So he did hit the wall a lot of times. And I think that if you know him and know how implacable and imperturbable he is, it is interesting to think of him getting into these tight spots.
It's because it's an incredibly vulnerable place to be as the owner of something you made, where it's just like, the buck stops with me. I am the creator of this thing. Let the judging begin. And if it's bad, then people go, well, you made a bad movie. You wrote a bad book. You take the hit full on. He's always had this quality of just not that he's grabbing the credit when it's good and then deflecting when it's not good, but I think that's a part of him.
There is some of that, and that's a really astute survival tactic, right? I mean, there's a writer's room game that the writers used to play about Lorne that was like, they would say, hands off, hands on. And it would be all about how if something tanked, he would say, I was hands off on that. But if it was great, he'd say, I was hands on about that. And, again, it's part of what you're trying to examine when you look at someone who's been doing this for 50 years is what gives them that longevity. And there is this survival instinct. People say, that, in the Game of Thrones of show business, he's the last man standing,
Hmm.
and he has this sense of how to protect himself. Part of it, it's from avoiding conflict. He keeps his head down. He's outlasted so many different administrations of NBC ownership, of slates of executives. There's a great line that Mike Schur, who's now a showrunner and wrote on SNL for years, about he was sort of parodying what the GE owners would have said, back when GE owned NBC. And it's, how come our laser guided missile department is doing so much better than our fart joke division? I
Hmm.
mean, imagine for years, Lorne's bosses were, people who made microwave ovens.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Just to go back a little bit, when did he let go of the potential goal of being a filmmaker, being a screenwriter, and what do you think the why of letting go of that was for him?
well, he left SNL after the first 5 years, and that was going to be his movie period. And he had all these high-minded projects that he wanted to do. He got banged up. In the movie business, 18 people have their fingerprints all over your project. It takes forever. There was no sense of satisfaction and completion. The reason SNL works for Lorne is because of the deadline. Like, you can't overthink it. You can't get precious because no matter what, it has to go on at 11:30 at night. Jim Downey, one of the long-term head writers of the show, has a great line about Lorne. He said, Lorne, bad at term papers, great at exams,
Hmm.
meaning the when the blue book is taken away, it's going to be good. But if you get to noodle around on the thing forever and ever, you're going to ruin it. And so that's sort of what happened to him when he was trying to make movies. Now, later with his SNL cast, he was able to executive produce some of these great, the Farley movies and Wayne's World and all that. But he was, not an auteur really. He was just being the executive producer. So I think once he realized, if I'm going to be in the editing room, the rewrites and dealing with the executive's notes, that holds no appeal for him.
Sure, because if you make a movie, that means you're in a car at 5:30 in the morning going
Exactly.
to some you're shooting in some godforsaken field somewhere, and you're sitting in a chair and it's freezing cold. It just doesn't seem like he's cut from that cloth.
Exactly. No, he also told me at one point that after he, was on his first movie set, he realized like that he would do it if he could work French hours,
Hmm.
meaning, at 1 p.m. He sleeps till noon. I mean, another great thing about the show is for him is that he's completely designed the schedule of the show around his own biorhythm. He
Hmm.
likes to stay up all night
Yeah.
and sleep late.
And
That's how the show works.
I've talked to numerous SNL people on the show and in real life about the show is beholden to a structure that if you take two steps away from it, seems like the gas guzzler of scheduling of just like we work all Tuesday night. Like everybody just stays here all night, and then you get up, you go home, you shower, and you come back, and we do 4 hours of a table read on a Wednesday afternoon, which is not everybody's creativity can fit a specific model like that, and that's a real
Right.
ask for certain people to be like, well, you do the lion's share of your initial writing for the week at 4 in the morning
Right.
on
Right.
Tuesday night, Wednesday morning.
Right. Well, it's always been that way. In the 70s, it worked because of cocaine,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
that's not, these days, as I say in the book, the cast favors Ozempic,
Yeah.
But but Lorne is very stubborn about sticking to the old ways. He has this if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of approach. But he has all kinds of rationalizations for it. If you ask him, well, why do we have to stay all night and write? He'll say, well, fatigue is your friend. Fatigue loosens up the creative
Hmm.
faculties. You're going to have better brainstorming. You're not going to be so self-conscious. But you're right that the whole schedule of the show is from another era. It's very wasteful. They they pick 12 sketches, maybe after read through, put them all into production, which means that they build expensive scenery and costumes and everything. And
Into a
then,
building that was never meant to
right,
have sets built in it
that's
that
right.
are getting built in another borough and driven in and barely fitting into an elevator. And it's just like it's
Careful. You're a careful reader.
well, I mean, I've known that, but it's just yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, logically, somebody should have said we're going to build a studio on the West Side Highway, and that's where we're going to do your show. We can build all the sets there. We can bring the people. Like it just rather than literally the most expensive real estate in America that we're tying up multiple floors for sketches that air at 12:30 in the morning on Sunday.
Right. Lorne likes to compare the show to it's like a David Lean epic. It would never be greenlit today because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, one week that I was there, right after dress rehearsal, there was like a whole van, a big white van that had been bought in Brooklyn, dismembered, brought up in pieces in the elevator, reconstituted in the studio. But then that sketch got cut, so that van went out in the garbage.
And that's
just
tens of thousands of dollars right there that will never be recouped. It is an interesting thing because he is just a series of contradictions in a lot of ways. He seems like he wants to build some sort of family in a way with everybody he works with, but then he's also very, very focused on being the dad who can step away and be withholding when need be. Like it's just like it's family, but it's not family because it's not your family. Loyalty is very important to him, but then he also understands it's a business as well. And coming away from that, some people seem to be like, well, when I get my thing, I'm never going to do it the way Lorne did it. And other people look at the way he did it like, well, I just learned how to do it and I want to be Lorne when I'm in the chair.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of loyalty, yes, he does like a tribe and he does like everyone to stay in the family. It's very much like The Godfather. But I've also heard him say, with a smirk, but he kind of means it. You'll find that your most loyal employees are not your most valuable employees. It's
Yeah.
kind of withering. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in terms of the management, the show does produce a lot of showrunners and producers and directors because they learned how to do it there. And they do learn because it's this hothouse atmosphere. They have to do everything. All the writers produce and direct their own sketches. And then there are other people who take some of it away, but then say, well, I want to be a little more warm and a little bit more nurturing. So, everybody kind of takes from it what works for them.
Yeah. Over the years, this is somebody who has hired countless people, but he's also fired countless people as well in the process. And so he has his advocates, but then he's had people like Michael O'Donoghue, for example. He didn't fire Michael O'Donoghue, right? No, he didn't, because the show ended when his run ended in 1980. Right. Michael O'Donoghue bounced back in under the next regimes for a window there. But it seemed like Michael O'Donoghue, one of the first person who spoke on Saturday Night Live, if you think about it, he's the first, right? Yeah. He's the first person in the first sketch. He carried a resentment for this guy who really did go out of his way to look after him
again and again
and gave him opportunity after opportunity. How does he roll with that? We're just like, because it's like chasing it's like, I want the guy who's never going to like me the guy who doesn't like anybody, I'm going to prove that he'll like me. And surprise of surprises, he didn't like you either. And, but he kept it seemed like he doesn't give up on certain people like that. Like, he's the one chasing some uncatchable goal.
Well, that's interesting. In the first 5 years, it was almost an accident that the cast became famous. When Lorne started the show, he thought it was going to be all about the guest hosts and the music. The cast he saw almost as like background characters.
Hmm.
So when Chevy Chase broke out as a huge star in the first year and then quit the show, that was traumatic for Lorne. It was like the breakup of the family. And he really didn't know if he was going to get over it. And then in the next few years, he lost Belushi, he lost Aykroyd, and he quickly realized, oh, this show is going to produce stars. They're going to leave.
Hmm.
That's going to be the permanent state of this show. So he learned that like a sports franchise, you have to keep rookies on the bench. You have to keep it turnover, and you have to not be so emotionally attached so your heart doesn't get broken when they leave.
Hmm. Yeah.
O'Donoghue was an unusual case because he was the sort of person who felt that everyone he'd ever worked with had screwed him over. And when the National Lampoon guys, everybody else, when Lorne met him, he thought, I'm never going to be that guy. And as you say, he
Yeah.
Johnny got the last laugh. I mean, he vilified Lorne to the end, which I think must have been very sad for
Yeah.
Lorne.
Right to the absolute end. He
Yeah,
resented this guy and everything he represented.
yeah. But Lorne is in general a little more remote now, I think. He is the boss. He is a little bit
Mhm.
older. He certainly has a handful of pets, people to whom he is actually more, warmer and more familial, like Mulaney and Pete Davidson and Tina, Colin Jost. But, you know, that's kind of an inside track.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting thinking about how he's a very high-minded guy. He has impeccable taste, and he's making a show that's ostensibly for kids and young adults. Like there's a 55-year age gap between like the target demo from where he's at and where his potential audience is at. So it's just like that dichotomy of having just knowing the best of it. He knows the best restaurants, he knows the best
Yeah.
sheets you can have and everything, and he's making something that is like low in a lot of ways. If you're going to just rank art,
Right.
sketch comedy on television is going to be at the lower end of that ladder.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he said to me once is, and this I guess goes back to what we were saying about him wanting to make cinema earlier in his life. Because I think in some way he probably would love to win an Oscar or something like that. He's got a
Hmm.
million. He said the thing with comedy is you get the audience, you get the money, but you never get the respect. You
Hmm.
know, but he isn't precious about it. I mean, it's one of the things I sort of like about him is that he recognizes that it's just show business. He doesn't have any pretense that it's high art. It's show business. That's why whenever you see a shot of backstage at SNL, you see a showgirl, a
Yeah.
llama, a person dressed like Abe Lincoln.
Hmm.
And so it is just showbiz. But you're right, his private life, his leisure time, it's all about private jets and St. Bart's and
Hmm.
the most expensive loafers he can find, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think his version of shaping the culture, like how he versus how he actually shaped the culture? How would you differentiate those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think he really does see from the time he spent in Hollywood before SNL when he bounced around between a lot of crappy variety shows like Perry Como and Phyllis Diller's show. He was very aware of what I call the hinges between eras,
Hmm.
of how uncool it was in the 70s for some, you know, these variety shows that were kind of stuck in the 50s. And I think he vowed to himself that he was never going to be one of those old guys, kind of,
Hmm.
you know, like the phrase I use in the book is, like a grandmother with a hula hoop. He was not going to be like an
Yeah.
old person trying to look hip. So he's always been aware of that. And I think as a result, early on, he was very good at sussing out, finding and hiring cool young people with good taste, and then actually delegating to them, actually listening to them.
Hmm.
His talent bookers are these brilliant young people. Um, he listens to them, but he has other questions. He'll be like, well, okay, so that person's great, but how will they be in this room? How will they be in 8H? Will they be able to connect with these several hundred audience members and the people at home? And, he brings a kind of an old time showman's um, wisdom to it, but he does want to listen to the smart young people. I mean, of course, he listened to his children. When his daughter Sophie was a teenager, One Direction was on the show all the time,
Hmm. Yeah.
which was
It,
smart.
it's it's a relief that he has the people he has to help him keep up to speed, because honestly, if I think about myself at 80 and if I was supposed to know all about like Love is Blind when I'm 80, because that's what I'm living I have to know that just like I don't know that seems like a pretty bleak future to just not be able to have to hold on to the small stuff that will resonate with a 23-year-old when you got an 8 hanging on your age.
I know, I think that's right. And I think he pays attention. Like one of the things that I observed that was interesting to write about in the book is how, the kind of Gen Z millennial sensibilities of a lot of the people in his cast and his writers' room, they're just those, it's just a different, a different value system from his. There's a funny bit in the book where he produced Mean Girls on Broadway, and he was telling me he got tickets for his friend Margaret Trudeau one night, and he was very disappointed because the lead, very young woman, called in sick that night because she had to take her dog to the vet. The dog had
Hmm.
eaten glue, and he just said, he couldn't believe that. And he said to me, he said, if it was Patty LuPone's dog, it would be dead,
Yeah.
which is in his mind how it should be, but he adjusts to these, more snowflakey young people, and you see it especially in certain political contexts. Like they're very, they were very upset when Trump hosted, and they're very upset if sometimes if they're asked to make fun of liberals.
Hmm.
And take is that the show is nonpartisan, and if there's a Democrat who should be made fun of, you're going to make fun of him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing to strike that balance between it's open season on everybody versus like, yes, but there is a line when actual like capital B bad people are
Yeah,
you're providing them a platform now
right.
to normal humanize them and normal like oh what a goof like when Steve Forbes, right? Am I like
Yes,
right
that's right.
when he
Yeah,
hosted? It's just like, oh, he's doing the sketch that just undercuts that he's this rich right wing guy. He's playing a slob on a roof, hammering and just act like the show. Like that stuff can go so far. The right sketch can
yeah,
just make you see somebody. It's like, oh, because then you get into that whole have a beer with them
yeah,
mentality. It's like, oh, I could have a beer with that guy,
yeah.
and if there is what is that responsibility in your opinion? Where is the line
Yeah.
for that?
Right. Well, I mean, I know Will Ferrell, has talked about how he lost sleep over the fact that the way he portrayed George Bush could have, helped get him elected because he was such a good old, likable, good old boy. I mean, I think that I agree with Lorne intellectually that you want to be an equal opportunity offender and go after everybody when they deserve it. But I do think that we're in such an extraordinary time right now. I mean, the stakes feel so high. We really feel like, you know,
Hmm.
it's madness. I mean, our democracy really seems to be in peril. So I do understand some of these writers and young people just thinking, we have to really ram this home. We can't, there can't be any gray areas. I mean, I was once over at the show, and one of the writers was saying, I'm kind of afraid of what if something I write makes him blow up the world.
Yeah.
So it's tricky.
Yeah. You covered Lorne's life, but you threaded it through the framework of 1 week at Saturday Night Live, starting on the Monday and going to the actual show on Saturday night. And Jonah Hill was the host of the episode that you had. It seemed like you had pretty ridiculous clearance on things. You were everywhere.
I was there for everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So reading between the lines on this, it seemed like it was a relatively prickly week in certain ways with Jonah Hill, that he was pushing for certain sketches that other people are just like, you need to know when to take the no on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's probably like a version of that every week, but this was it was very interesting. What you saw as the week proceeded is Monday, it's just a big love fest with the host. You want the host to say, feel like, we love you. You're in great hands here. We want to hear all your ideas. But then as the days go by, by the end, it's kind of like, we've heard enough from him. We're just going to make up our own decisions. And the kid gloves come off, and, by Saturday, Jonah's being kind of cut off mid-sentence. And
yeah,
but I thought that was so fascinating to track. And also to see Jonah Hill's, awareness of it, because he's pretty politic. And by the end, I think when he would kind of sense that Lorne wasn't into something, he would just like, okay. But again, just the politics of it, to see the way Lorne would quietly wield that power in these rooms full of people and, very gently press little levers to kind of get his way.
Yeah.
Was fascinating up close.
Mm-hmm. With the show, there's this window between the dress and the live show where it seems like there's this 90 minutes where this guy suddenly becomes like he's just like he's been saving it for every opinion about everything to come blasting out of him before the live show. What was that? Was there a real shift in him suddenly, because he's saying, cut this, change that, this, that.
Yeah. Well, and that was remarkable. I mean, all week, Lorne has always thought of it as a kind of an egalitarian show. And all week I would see him asking everybody their opinions, PAs. I mean, in every meeting, he would sort of make a point of asking everyone in the room to speak, because he wants to hear what everybody thinks. At dress rehearsal, he's mostly listening to how the audience reacts to things. So he's adding that to his data bank. But then, right after dress, there's a little interior staircase between the 8th floor studio and the 9th floor where his office is. And it's just this crappy little cinder block studio. And I remember walking up those stairs with him and thinking, well, in retrospect, because this was 2018, it's just like what happens in the elevator in Severance.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Scott and the others, they go up the elevator and it's like...
Yeah.
It's at the other end. And he's like Superman. He's this different guy. Suddenly, he's not listening to what anybody else says. He just has got all the answers, and he stands there. He even stands a little bit taller, it seems. And it just is like, okay, this is going to go first. This is going to go last. Cut 18 seconds out of this and 2.5 minutes out of that. Change this wig, get rid of that chair. And it's astonishing. I mean, Paul McCartney told me that sometimes he comes on a Saturday just to watch Lorne in that meeting.
Wow.
Because you see this transformation. And that's why I am always maintaining that no one is just going to replace him. Like, they're not going to bring somebody else in, because it's his taste and it's his authority that makes people, galvanizes people. I mean, my theory is more that he could keep doing it for at least 10 more years, but I think it'd be fine if he just came in on a few hours Wednesday and a few hours on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. It's a tricky thing, because he seems like he's in incredible sharpness and for somebody who's 80, but when it just happens overnight, suddenly it's like you shift down. Like when people suddenly, it's like, oh, you lost your fastball now. Oh, you maybe shouldn't be like people age out of it. Like when you just get to a certain age, at some point it does fade.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like in theory he could go for 10 years, but there's just going to be, this is a high stress job, even though he's doing it in the most comfortable possible way. It's still a job, and it's a high stress job, and it's a time consuming job, even though he could come in limited hours. How long do you realistically think he should do it?
Well, I mean, I think as long as his cognitive faculties are intact, like he does take, he's not exactly a health nut, but he does take care of himself. He walks 5 miles a day. He stopped drinking. I think he's, he gets plenty of rest.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on vacation a lot. I think he is thinking about it. I think he's not like those Silicon Valley guys trying to, cryogenically, live forever. But I do think he could do it for 10 more years.
Okay.
The other thing he's done is he has this extraordinary little group of deputies, 4 people. And it was nice to be able to shine some light on these people. Aaron Doyle, Steve Higgins, Eric Kenward, and Carolyn Maroney. And they are kind of like his alter egos. Each of them represents a stripe of his taste and personality.
Sure.
And together, they really are a formidable team, and they know just what Lorne, everyone there, not just these people, 100 times a day say, what would Lorne do? What would Lorne do? That's how they've been programmed to think.
But the trick of all that is, though, Lorne does need to be there for that. You can't, because then suddenly it's like there's nobody at the top of the pyramid anymore, and everybody's at the second tier of the pyramid, and then that's when it turns into, well, who's running this thing? And then the knives come out.
That's why I think if he came on Wednesday for read through and he came Saturday for dress, it could work. I mean, we'll see. I sure hope he keeps doing it. He's never missed a single show. And if you think about all those years, the idea of never getting a stomach flu or, the week his children were born, I mean, he still showed up.
Yeah. No, it's.
I think he needs it as much as they need him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, just tell me a little bit about the new show, which was the show he did. Was it 1984? The new show?
Yeah, it was early '84. Yeah,
which was a sketch show. It was a Friday night sketch show.
Yes.
On NBC.
Well, if you just looked at it on paper, you would have thought it would have been a big success because it had fantastic writers' room, Jim Downey, Jack Handy, and George Meyer, and all these people who would become legendary comedy writers. With the regular performers on it were like John Candy and Gilda and Catherine O'Hara, all these amazing people. There were 2 things that I think contributed to it not quite working. There were 3 hosts, and the hosts were Buck Henry, Dave Thomas, and Valerie Bromfield, the latter 2 being Canadian comics. But the thing is, they were kind of bland. I was 23. They were probably middle, they seemed middle-aged to me. And they were a little vanilla. If you think about the original Not Ready for Primetime players, there was some kind of ethnic mix to them. They were kind of sexy and edgy, but these 3 people were like a little bland. I think that was part of it. The other thing that doomed it, I think, is that it was taped on Thursday night in a studio, then edited and aired on Friday night. And that gets back to what I was saying earlier. These tapings would go on for 4 hours because, Lorne would yell cut and they'd start at the beginning and the audience got tired and everybody got tired. And then they'd be up all night in the editing room, piecing the thing together. So it kind of lost the electric magic of live television, and it had all the staleness of tape. They had to put, we had to add laugh tracks, and that.
No, that's the opposite of what he had built for all these years. Is something that could be just done in segments, doing take two, all of that stuff. That just like that goes counter. And also like to what you're saying about the host, it's like, I mean, Dave Thomas is one of the to me one of the all-time funniest people on SCTV, and Buck Henry is brilliant, but a host requires a whole other skill set than being funny and having innate talent. You need to be able to host. Like,
right.
Yeah.
No, and their chemistry was just between the three of them was like just a little bit flat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think it makes you think about, Belushi and Gilda and how there was just they were kind of exotic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also nobody knew that this thing was going to, if anybody knew this was going to be on for 50 years back in 1975, it would be an unrecognizable show. These things only work because people are doing the best job they can today, and then whatever tomorrow is, we'll figure that out tomorrow. And then suddenly you turn around and you've done years. I've been doing this stupid show for 25 years, Susan. I'm trapped. I'm like Lorne Michaels. I'm like the dollar store Lorne Michaels here. I'm like Dollar Tree Lorne Michaels over here doing this show. So, but I know it's like, I didn't sign up for 25 years of it. I signed up to do 6 months of it. And then you turn around and suddenly you've done half your life. You've been doing this show. So weirdly enough, I do understand parts of it. I would like to understand the fancy St. Bart's part. I don't know if I will. What is your favorite era of the show?
I think I have two. One is the late 80s cast with Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks, Dana Carvey, Kevin Nealon. I love that cast.
Mm-hmm.
I also love the cast about 10 years ago. That's, Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig and Fred Armisen. That I think was kind of the coolest cast that they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And they obviously all really adored each other, which came through.
Yeah, absolutely. This book is a monumental achievement. Congratulations on the scope and the size of it, and it's a really fun. It's an incredibly fast read because you're just on the ride for the entirety of it. You did an outstanding job with it. What is next for you, Susan? What on earth would you do next?
I have a pretty demanding day job here at the New Yorker. And so what I've been enjoying for the last few months is just getting back into doing my job here without this enormous other deadline pressing down on me. So I'm getting back that equilibrium. But I have a couple of ideas, but they're still cooking.
Without saying who it is there another subject that you would like to take on?
There's one person that I'm thinking about. A little bit adjacent to this book.
Okay.
This book, I didn't know it when I started writing it, but to do this book properly, as you know, it also has to be kind of a history of show business and comedy and politics. There were times when I was marooned in the middle of this book and I thought, oh my God, I'm writing the encyclopedia. It was, but as you say, it is fun. It's not homework. So,
it's a fun book, and you should be very proud of it because you captured generations of comedy in this one book. It's about Lorne Michaels, but it's about a whole lot more than this one guy. It's about 50 plus years of comedy. So congratulations. Everybody should buy Lorne, the man who invented Saturday Night Live. And I can't thank you enough for coming on, Susan, and talking about the book, and I hope you have a great rest of 2025.
Thank you. You too. No, it's always fun to talk about Lorne, so thank you.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.